Welcome, everyone. My name is Sam Fogg. My pronouns are she, her. I am co-president of Seattle Council PTSA, and I want to welcome you tonight. To some people, I appear to be white. To others, I do not. I am, in fact, both Chinese and white. I am also disabled. And tonight I am really honored to have with us both Anita Cameron and Yordanos Gebreamlak, who are Black disability leaders. Yordanos is the Deputy Director of the Office of Education Ombuds here in Washington State. And Anita Cameron has been a disability rights, disability justice leader and involved in the disability movement for at least 43 years. She is in history books. She has been involved in things across the country and in so many ways, leading the work, educating people, and truly being an example of how to move systems, how to change things. And I can say, as a disabled person, I wouldn't have some of the rights that I have if it weren't for work led by Anita. And I wouldn't understand and know about my rights and about aspects of my identity if it weren't for reading, following, and understanding the tremendous things that Anita Cameron has done. And simultaneously, I see her being left out of discussions. And so it is just a tremendous privilege to be able to be in space and center her tonight. We do have the chat turned off. You can chat to hosts and co-hosts in order to ask questions. But this is one of the things that we're going to try and really make this discussion a deep one, and it's hard to do that and track the chat at the same time. So I will be tracking the chat, but I want to first invite Yordanos to introduce herself, and then Anita, and then we'll dive in. So Yordanos. Yordanos, you are muted. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As Sam shared, my name is Yordanos Gebreamlak. I use she, her pronouns. And I am the Deputy Director in the Office of the Education Ombuds. I am a Black woman with Black curly hair that I'm wearing down with the middle part. I'm also wearing a medium gray shirt. I actually have my coat on, which is light blue, one of those puffer jackets. I'm gonna head to dinner right after this. So I basically have everything on but my purse and shoes at the moment. Behind my shoulder, you can see my light gray wall. And over my left shoulder, you can see the beginnings of my closet, which has a white door. And I am currently sitting. I am disabled, and I am just more than honored to share space with Anita again tonight. So thank you to Sam, and I'm just so honored to be with you, Anita.
Thank
This
you,
is Sam.
Yordanos. Thank you, Sam. Hi, I'm Anita Cameron. My pronouns are she, they. I am a Black woman with kind of caramel colored skin, kind of graying locks. And I have on a kind of maroon long sleeve t-shirt that's dedicated to the Gang of 19 and 40 Years of Adapt. Yeah, to say that I'm honored to be here and to be with Yordanos and Sam that's like an understatement. And there's um there's there's so much I think that's been going on, um, not only with me, but in disability rights and disability justice, and all. And so I'm, definitely thank you.
So I want to say thank you to you both. This is Sam for being here. I want to check in. Ion, I think I saw that Hodan was here. Do the two of you have a preference over who I make interpreter? Hodan, I've given you co-host permission, so you can unmute and tell me if you want me to make you interpreter. And I'm not sure if you are, yeah, there you go. Hodan?
I'll let Ayan do it, please.
Okay, you'll let Ion do it? Okay, great. So this is Sam, and as we continue tonight, we'll just make sure we say our names for interpreters so they know who's speaking. But I'd like to ask you both, and jump in however you want, a little bit about the work that you've done as Black disabled leaders, and kind of what you see as the importance of intersectionality in this work, and just kind of getting people to give a little bit of background so they can understand where we are in that conversation.
Jordanos.
Oh, Yordanos, you're muted again. I'm asking you to unmute. I made you a co-host so you can mute and unmute easily, but
I think I'll keep myself unmuted. I'm happy to start, although what does one say with Anita Cameron present? I could literally share, I've been living on Venus for the past 6 months and I'm just here for the holidays, and all that could be true. And still, we have Anita Cameron present. But I guess I'll just kind of start with where I am currently. So as was shared, I'm the Deputy Director in the Office of the Education Ombuds. My background is in social work. And what's been most important to me, whether it's been a paid position, volunteer position, it's been to make my way into spaces where I, as a Black disabled person, I'm seen as the recipient of services and not of the other side. And I'm talking going out for positions in CPS, right? Where just having that opportunity again to be on the other side of it when so many of the experiences you're pegged as, no, you're the recipient of, not managing, not contributing to the work of, not shifting culture. And it was there where I first learned of a word that I still don't even know if it's real, and that is parentification, and having to say, no, we don't separate families because an 11-year-old took out the trash or changed the diaper of their younger sibling. This is part of collectivist culture. Working at youth, homeless shelters and shifting culture there, because there were times where there were systems in place and it was coded as, oh, we're just, we're allowing people to share space and make the space their own. And it looked like nothing more than chores to earn a place to sleep. So it's been really important to me wherever I've landed working inside of a school, whether it's CPS, whether it's as an ombuds, as a deputy director, more on the operational side, to be more than just present, to push back when the attempt has been made to just kind of make me a figurehead to say, hey, we got a Black disabled person working here, and really to connect the stated values to tangible practice that actually shifts culture. And the other thing too that I'll say is I firmly believe that we need both folks working in these systems. As taxing as it is critical. Systems didn't create themselves. But we also need the Anitas. We need both. We need both. Again, systems didn't create themselves, and we need that assistance from the pioneers like Anita to also help us push.
Anita, oh gosh, there's a lot of well, the major thing that I'm doing these days, because I have retired, if you will, from active participation, protests, and the like. I haven't totally retired because sometimes there are things that affect me that's going on here in New York State that um, I have to deal with and do protests with, and but that is definitely what I have been working on, is the erasure of the erasure of the contributions of Black disabled in our history. And I almost am I mean, yeah, there's I guess I don't necessarily like really talking about accomplishments, if you will. But I've been doing this for in ADAPT in social justice work for 43 years, and in ADAPT in disability rights, disability justice, disability history for 43 years, and was honored to have participated in some major things. It participated in the Capitol Crawl, which definitely led to the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Rotunda takeover, which also, I mean, between that and the Capitol Crawl, and I would assert that even more, as historic as the Capitol Crawl was, that takeover of the Rotunda, it led to 104 of us being arrested. I was number 81, but it did directly lead to the Americans with Disabilities Act being passed in the House and Senate, and then signed into law by President George H.W. Bush. Shortly before that, I participated in a small way, but I was honored to be able to be in solidarity with the deaf students at Gallaudet. And interestingly enough, I am here in Washington, D.C. as we speak on the campus of Gallaudet. I have not been on the campus of Gallaudet since 1988, when the students there were fighting for a deaf president. And for weeks, you know, um, they fought, they demonstrated, vigiled, all of this to finally have a deaf president of a college, an undergraduate university for deaf students. All we wanted was a deaf president. And so myself and my supervisor, Dennis Schreiber, who himself was deaf, um, went and were out there in solidarity with the students. And by this time, they had been protesting for weeks. And shortly after we joined the students, they won their victory, and I. King Jordan was appointed as the first step president of Gallaudet. So that was just some of the, some of the stuff, in 2017, when Medicaid was under threat. And I'm sure that people whose memories are long will remember newscasts with disabled people being dragged out of congressional offices, disabled people being arrested, and all of that. Yes, I did participate in that. I was one of the ones dragged out of and arrested in Senator Mitch McConnell's office. I was also one of the ones in Ohio who went to jail for protesting at Senator Rob Portman's office. But we saved Medicaid. Disabled people did that. And I'm honored and privileged to have had a part in that. And I mean, to say that it's humbling and an honor really isn't, really saying enough, because when I joined ADAPT in 1986 at the age of 21, I was just a disabled person who was born with multiple disabilities, but had never really been around disabled folks. I knew that I was born too late to participate in the civil rights movement for Black folks in the United States. And so at the age of 9, made a personal vow that I would work to make things better for everyone. I didn't know how I would do that. I just made that vow. But at the age of 16, I got involved in social justice and social change, did a lot of causes, from anti-nuclear, nuclear proliferation, anti-apartheid, working with homeless people, working in and within the LGBTQ communities, and then finally finding ADAPT and joining the disability rights movement. And I think that I'm going to stop from there, because I may have totally skirted the question or whatnot that you, Sam, may have been looking for. And so I'm going to kind of hush.
This is Sam, and you didn't skirt it. I did want to mention I put some links in the chat, both to ADAPT and to Gallaudet, for people who want to follow along and see those, and also for Anita's website, we were there too. And I wanted to highlight something that you said, Anita, and I'd like both of you to speak to it if you would. But Anita talked about the erasure of the erasure. And one of the things that I think is so important to acknowledge is that Black leadership and Black disabled leadership has been critical to all of the advocacy movements around disability. And we've had Black disabled leadership historically, from Harriet Tubman, Fannie Lou Hamer, and more recently. Um, and yet, so often their stories are erased, they're removed, they're deleted, or they're told or not fully told. And so I'd like to explore not only the discussion of the current and active erasure that is happening now, um, but also the impact on that as we are trying to prepare our youth for their potential for the future. How do we tell them what they can be when we're actively erasing examples of who they can be, who they can grow up to be? So if both of you would like to speak a little bit about erasure. Thank you.
Well, this is Anita, and one thing that I want to highlight that we don't necessarily talk about in the Black community. And I was just at a gathering about 3 weeks ago with mostly activists of color. It was not a disability setting. And so I was only one of maybe a couple of disabled folks there. We have a huge problem with ableism. Particularly in our Black community. And I don't understand it. I have said on multiple occasions that there's almost a disconnect between our Black community and disabled. And, if that isn't, rough enough, then the whole dominant culture, aspect, it's almost like natural, if you will, unfortunately, to downplay or outright erase the contributions of Black folks in this country, unless you just can't get away with it. So thinking about Black disabled and our contributions to our country, and our work, on the grassroots level, for rights and justice, we're still, I think we're still dealing with that. So we're dealing not only with the problem of racism, but a problem of ableism as well. And with those, two problems going on, that's why, I felt that it's imperative, for my project. I was in New Jersey at Robert Wood Johnson headquarters, explaining that we were there too, Blacks in the disability movement. It addresses not only disability justice, but also health equity. Because, I grew up not seeing anyone, not having any role models And I have disabled Black women to this day who come up and tell me, I never knew people like you existed until I met you. And so, from everything from dealing with the ableism and the racism to like even working outside of disability and other organizations and whatnot, we have to crack that, that uh, that nut, that gate, if you will, of gatekeeping and discrimination and ableism and presuming incompetence rather than presuming competence and creating a welcoming environment. And so that's kind of, how, how it's been, for me and working um, to unerase those who have been erased. And racism has a particularly horrid place when you have a US member of Congress who did critical work in the passage of civil rights legislation. And that congressman is totally forgotten. And we got to do, you know, um, we got to do something about that. And not only, I think, in projects of mine, but in also pushing other people to um to not forget us, and to highlight our stories, and everything. But it really does start with us as a community, but you know, um, for the greater good of all of us, you know. Yeah, this needs to, we have to remember this. We have to record the stories, no matter how insignificant they may seem, because what ends up happening is that um it's usually those with some education um who are highlighted, and no disrespect or shade to anyone. Um, but the people that I work with, you're not going to hear about them. Most of the people that I was in the trenches with didn't get to go to school. They didn't get to have an education. Their education was the streets and growing up, disabled and having that fire in the belly and wanting to do something. Um, we have to teach our young people that people like you exist. They're around us. You're not alone. Don't ever think you're alone, because people like you did this. Young people need to know about the Gang of 19 who, on July 5th and 6th of 1978, got out of their wheelchairs and lay in the street for 2 days, protesting the lack of lifts on buses. That led to Denver being the first city in the United States to be totally accessible. And the oldest of these young people, other than a couple of, older fellas in their 50s and 60s, the oldest of these young folks was 20 years old. The youngest was 13. And though a lot of folks don't say anything, we had one Black disabled activists who were among the Gang of 19. Two folks of color, my friend Larry Ruiz and my friend George Roberts, who happened to be Black. But their stories aren't lifted up in the Gang of 19. And you don't know the fact that you had Blacks and folks of color who were out there too. So that's what we really need to teach our young folks, that there were and there are people who look like you, who are out there doing the thing, out there doing the work. And that's what we have to, that's why I always talking to young people, talking to kids and whatnot, because they need to know, because it still blows my mind when, at the age of 59, I have a Black woman in her early 40s who's telling me, I never knew anyone like me until I met you. And we have to do better. We have to really lift up, those folks. And so it's always when you see people, that look like you, that participate in history, that does something to you on a positive level. And that's what, I want to get, out there, to people. So I'm gonna hush right now because I could run my mouth all night.
I don't know that we want you to hush your mouth, Anita. This is Yordanos. Um, as I was listening to you share, I grew up in a different decade, but same story about not having any representation, going through all of K-12 with an IEP, not knowing not one educator, counselor who was doing their job, and also had a disability. Um, the separation that happens among Black people in the school system. So I grew up, recent diaspora, coming into this country as a refugee with my family, not knowing a word of English and having to learn it when entering school. And the division that's caused literally in the school system among Black folks of the recent diaspora and Black folks who have been here for generations, that conditioning of the mind that's done in the school system to say, you're different, doing the same thing with disability, right? Like not learning of the history of Black disabled folks coming into disability identity so much later in life because of that lack of representation. And that erasure that you were talking about, I think the one thing that I would want people to walk away from this evening's conversation is knowing that it happens every day, everywhere. Examine where you work, examine where it is that you are in community, and examine the different ways that the erasure happens literally every day, from hiring practices to Anita, you mentioned feeling like someone is incompetent, but not really having any basis to back it up other than having that information that the person is disabled or seeing that they are Black, right? So I think that there's a lot to learn when it comes to the erasure that happens in history and in the disability justice movement. But also, please don't be so far removed from what's happening right in front of you in your daily lives concerning erasure.
Mhm. Yeah, this is Anita, because it continues to this very day.
Yeah.
That erasure. We almost have to seek out those, who, are like us. And even though most of the time those folks, tend to have more education and experience, still um this is so ingrained in us,
Yeah.
you know that we repeat this. I mean, in this country, we start Black history with like slavery, not understanding that Black history like totally precedes that by thousands upon thousands of years, but that's what we, and if, we are so into the devaluation of disabled people, then it's no surprise that you're not telling the stories,
Mhm.
of those of us who are out there creating things, who are out there changing laws, changing practices, and things of that nature, you know. But I think that, it's a macro level, issue, but it's also, as we're, you know, um, looking in our own communities, um, unfortunately, uh, the ableism is there. Unfortunately, I reach out to activist organizations and they don't want to deal with me because I'm disabled. Doesn't matter that I too am Black, but that whole disability, it's almost like it's almost like it negates my Blackness, and should not that should not be. And so I had a recent opportunity to attend a situation where it was not a disability setting, but I got to educate those folks on those of us with disabilities and how you're dealing with us and how you're presuming incompetence when you should be presuming competence, how you set up a toxic environment for us and wonder why we don't deal, and so yeah, so much goes, into that, and so much, you know, um, so much that we could be out there giving if people would only listen. And I'm a little bit tired of people listening, so I just kind of put myself out there, and educate whether you want to hear it or not, because whether you want to hear it or not, you need to hear it. So, yeah.
This is Yordanos, and I can't remember if it was you, Sam, or you, Anita, who brought up, I think it was you, Anita, intersectionality and why it's so critical, because the flip side of what we're talking about is being in white dominated spaces and folks in those spaces feeling like they first lead and then bring us in to prominence, if you will. And the issue with that is if we are not from the jump part of any sort of action that's going to be taken, now my energy is extended to undoing what you have done wrong because you didn't start with me in the first place.
Mhm. I always tell people I'm sick and tired of us reaching out to you and us getting ghosted. You need to come to us.
Right.
That's all there is to it. Step out of your comfort zone and come to us. We need to be on the ground floor. We need to have um, effective, real participation. Because
Mm.
what I've done, I was saying, because we're always talking about being at the table, right? So I
Mhm.
was saying that you can be at the table and still be on the menu,
That's right.
because people can deal with us simply because they have to. I don't really want to deal with y'all, but I have to. And so we're going to do the bare minimum. We're going to create a toxic environment, and, oh, well, there it is. Whereas if you're really interested, in reaching out and, don't tell us what we're going to do. You let us tell you what we're going to do and what we have to offer. And that goes not only in these groups, but in other. I do a lot of emergency preparedness, and the same thing, don't, if I show up, at your incident command, don't try to tell me what I'm going to do. You let me tell you as a disabled person what I'm going to do, what I can do, and believe me when I tell you I can do it. Yeah, I'm blind, but I'm a decent note taker, oddly enough. Yeah, I'm blind, but I can pick up real closely that you're not traveling with a buddy and you need to be with a buddy. You're not behaving in a safe fashion and you need to. And so there's just so much, that we can do. Like I said, it's weird that like anything that I get involved in, I have to kind of turn it into disability because there isn't. So I got involved in emergency preparedness, only to discover that not very many people with disabilities involved in that. And in disasters, we fail, we die needlessly, we are failed. But if we were on those commissions and those committees, if we were, out there, if you just accepted that, hey, if we show up, we got stuff to offer. Take us, because the government ain't coming, and you need as many people as possible. If you have disabled people who are trained, in emergency preparedness, and it's fairly easy. There are community programs out there that FEMA puts out. I'm a CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. I'm a CERT instructor. I was the first blind CERT instructor for the state of Colorado. I'm a CERT program manager, meaning that I design CERT programs, which meant that when I was in Colorado, I designed an independent living skills program involving teaching people coming out of nursing homes emergency preparedness, going into their homes, setting up emergency preparedness plans, and if they were interested, training them to be CERTs. And in that way, I recruited over 30 disabled people to be CERTs, including an 85-year-old blind woman who went through the course and passed it. And so we're out there as disabled people. We can be involved in any aspect of the community that we, put our minds to, whether it's emergency preparedness, whether it is, community leadership, whether it is we decide we want to volunteer our services, whether it's a soup kitchen, a shelter, any place. I think people, they need to see that we're there and we want to do. We don't want to just, sit on our duffs doing nothing. We want to be out in our communities, contributing, doing the things, that we can. And it's just a matter of folks stepping out the way and letting us do that.
This is Yordanos, and I would just say like stepping clear out of the way because, you mentioned earlier, Anita, being at the table and still being on the menu. So there's like this push and pull, right? Like you push to get in, but then there's that pull away from us disabled folks for that power. So like I would just tack on like clear out of the way. Don't just kind of sort of move out of the way. Move completely. Let go. And that's kind of like the struggle when you've made it into a lot of spaces like I have. There's still that holding on that's done by non-disabled people. And it's interesting because on the one hand, folks will turn to you on disability related matters so that, you know, you can impart your professional and personal experience, but there's still that maintaining of like questioning, you know, the competence. And so that power is not fully let go. So which is it? Do I have plenty to share and you see the value in that, or are you going to hang on to that power of yours because you don't think I'm going to be able to do it better?
This, Anita, or get threatened if you do it better.
Yeah.
When you do it better,
Mm-hmm.
feel some kind of way because
Mm-hmm.
you're not supposed to be able to do that. You're disabled. You're less than. You're not supposed to be able to do that. You're not supposed to be competent. What's this? So yeah.
Yeah. We just might shift culture. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing that? What are we doing? What are we doing shifting culture?
Yeah.
This is Sam, and one of the things that I've noticed in some spaces is a space or activism or advocacy may start with Black disabled leadership and that get taken over by whiteness. And then later, as though it is a gift,
Mm,
people go back to original leaders in some cases. And in a very patronizing and controlling way, invite them back to the table, a table that they built. And I think about that when we talk about the impact of erasure and why this is so critical to talk about what has been done and to not lose track of the history of who's been doing the work. And I was wondering if either of you have seen this or have thoughts about this.
this is Yordanos. I can't say that I've actually been given back anything, if I'm being honest. But there is this superficial, how shall I say, re-inclusion, if you will. So it's kind of a space that's taken over. And I'm going to go ahead and extend that to Sam, to not just say by white folks, but by non-Black folks, folks of color. And it's just dismissive action after dismissive action. And I'd mentioned earlier that inside outside pressure is how we get things done. And so when they've seen the result of like the erasure of the work of Black disabled people, then being like, ooh, we've fallen out of favor with a particular community, that's not good. So then superficially, again, making you feel like you're allegedly included. That's kind of what I observed, and things just kind of are muddied after that. I can't say that anything has ever been given back once taken.
This, Anita, or if it is, it's kind of conditional.
Mm.
And it depends on if you're doing and saying the right thing. And as long as you are saying and doing the right things and not ruffling feathers, you know, then it's okay. But I don't think anything's ever like really truly like given back. And it's one of the reasons that I that I resigned, retired from that whole scene. I got tired of the unequal power dynamics um, that are put on us. I got sick and tired of always needing someone's permission or feeling as if I needed someone's permission to move about or to navigate, or that I had to be very careful about what I said, lest I angered the wrong people. And to me, that's, yeah, I mean, to me, as far as I'm concerned, that's the same as being at the table yet being on the menu. And so I think it's the reason why I've been focusing, more and more on chronicling the contributions of Black disabled, um, without having to get approval from others, whites and non-Black folks of color, um, without having to get that kind of approval. I found that um, I still had to navigate those weird waters. And in order not to do so, I had to back out of all aspects of that and concentrate solely on my project, unless I'm dealing with my day job, and that's a whole nother thing. But I did really get sick and tired of the unequal and uneven power dynamics. Um, and then that's what kind of led me, on the path of my own. Because when you're not the dominant, and whatnot, yeah, I mean, you always have an eye on you. You always have, people looking over your shoulder unless you can totally get out of that environment. And that's what I've tried my best to do in the past, well over a year and a half, is to take myself out of all those environments where I need permission. And put myself, in environments where I'm in control. And it still kind of takes a lot to do that. Not everybody can do that, and it took 40 years, for me to be able to, but I think that at this point, for me, I still see all of the unequal power dynamics. And so, just kind of backing out of that, is how I decided to navigate that. I'm not gonna have I refuse to be in a position where I have to ask or beg for permission. That's just, I'm done with that.
This is Yordanos, something that weighs heavy is knowing the when. When do you do that? On the one hand, I imagine, that decision is made like really paying attention to the internal, right? Your center as a disabled person. And then the other thing that I think about both as a disabled person, and the path that I've chosen professionally, right? So kind of like you never clock out, right? Like when you live that existence. And also knowing that these systems continue with or without you, but they also continue as they are. It feels like with you working in them anyway. So like, no, like, when is that point where you're just like, okay, that's it? Going to completely back out from the spaces where you need permission, where eyes are on you in a very specific way. Just knowing who's going to be left is such a burden. And not saying that one person solves anything, right? Like that, but that's also hard to contend with when you also, like, there is no clocking out for me being a
Yeah.
Black disabled person.
Yeah.
And I know who's around these tables. And so like it's tough. It's tough to know when to say, okay, that's it.
This, Anita, and it took me, that's what I said, it took me 40 years to, to come to this, to like really gather the courage,
Mm-hmm.
if you will, uh, to do this, because, kvetch and moan, about a situation all you want,
Mm-hmm.
but just sitting around kind of kvetching and moaning, it still kind of left me powerless, and so in that situation, I just kind of took that power, you know, back. I mean, obviously, when you have a job and all of that, you're gonna, and so I wasn't including my day job in this, but the movement and the community and everything that I have really given my life to. Um, and it's like it took me a while to, okay, y'all not paying me. You're not paying my bills. Um, and I have my own troops, and if you can't understand, how you contributed contributed to that, and what that looks like, for me, because if you're on top, you don't have to worry about asking for permission. You don't have to worry about power dynamics, or anything like that. You know, I'm in this situation where I get called stuff like icon, legend, and all of that, and still was in this situation where, there were power dynamics and I needed permission to move in
Mm-hmm.
certain ways. And then I just got to the point where it's like, oh, well, okay, well, if y'all are using those words to describe me and using those words and my name in the same sentence, then I shouldn't have to have your permission or anything to do. If you're going to call me icon, treat me as such.
Mm-hmm.
Um, don't call me a legend and then put me in a position where, I have to go asking mommy and daddy for permission. Mother, may I? You
Mm-hmm.
know, I paid my dues, and I started this when I was 21. I'm 59 now. You know, respect the fact that I've spent literally all of my adult life in this. Um, and after 40 years, I'm an elder. I shouldn't have to be begging permission from anybody to move in those spaces. And so that's, finally it was literally finally in May of 2023 when I went on my last um action and all. And, I said, it's time for me to retire and do things that I want to do, which gave me more time for my project and things of that nature. But, yeah, after a while, you get sick and tired of asking, Mommy, may I? And
Mhm.
just have to take that power back in any way that you can.
This is Sam, and DJ Savarese, who had to leave, but did ask a question, and will be watching the recording, said, Anita and Yordanos, thank you for reigniting the fire in my belly to get the Lives in Progress collective off the ground so everyone can see people like themselves leading meaningful lives in their communities. What advice would you give us to make sure young, Black, disabled people find out about, see themselves in, and benefit from the collective?
This Anita, I adore DJ. I am on the board of the Alliance, um, and had some input um, into into that. And I think it's a matter of I think in this you just have to reach out. Um, I think in that case it's not you know, there's marketing, and all of that. But I think that, just at some point you really have to go to those communities, whether it's setting up a meeting with like some representatives of an organization, whether it's, hey, go up into the hood, go up on the college campuses, talk to folks about the Lives in Progress collective. Um, Go to independent living centers, go to disability organizations, go to, all over, because the Lives in Progress collective, it seeks to match disabled people up with mentors and different disabled people all over the country. You can search for folks under a number of different um, terms and interests and things of that nature. But yeah, it's definitely just a matter of like, just at that point, you just got to get out and go out, more and more presentations, more like actually in the community, more like going to like an independent living center, or going to um a school, a high school or college or something like that, and talking to the kids, and showing them this is what it's like, but definitely concentrating um searches and everything in the inner city, in the urban areas, and like I said, like on college campuses, high schools, stuff like that. That's how I think that's how the word's gonna get out about Lives in Progress.
This is Yordanos. I second that, the getting out there piece, and doing so in ways where, whether it's youth, whether we're talking about elders with disabilities, whoever it is, actually see themselves in the folks who are sharing this information. Because so often, like you said, Anita, you could share all the PowerPoints and let's watch this informational video, but if you can't connect yourself with someone else's experience and trajectory and kind of where they are and what they've seen and what they've done and what they've touched and what they haven't seen, like all of those things, that it kind of just doesn't feel real. So for that information to be shared by those where, I'm in education and centered on K-12. So I think about students and educators and that sector a lot. So the students can't see themselves and the folks giving the message, it kind of just something that's just floating in the air. It's not going to feel grounded.
This is Sam, and I'm looking at the time. And I know I would like to keep this conversation going late into the night, but I also know, Anita, you are on the East Coast, so it's late over there.
Mm.
But one of the things that has been on the mind of many of us here in Seattle in PTA space is that members of Seattle Council, our PTAs, voted to boycott a major event by our state PTA. And that was because it was being held in an anti-LGBTQ venue. And when we support our students, we support all of our students. But there's a lot of conversation around how do you decide when to disrupt or when to work within the system? When is it more powerful to boycott, and when is it more powerful to participate? And I was wondering if the two of you could reflect on that. And I also just want to mention that because I know some on here will have feelings about this, is that the vote to boycott included not only around the venue, but also around disability accommodations, and also around a failure to release a full DEI report that had been prepared in 2022. But how do we do the best that we can to make the changes? How do we decide when to leave and when to work within? And you both are leaders in these spaces, in different spaces, and have to think about these things. So I was wondering about your thoughts on how you make that decision, not necessarily about the one that I'm referencing now, but just how do you decide when to disrupt and when to make change from within?
This is Anita. I mean, me personally, and as, an ADAPT member and all, you always want to start out working with people. Because, I mean, a lot of people who, especially back in the day, who heard of ADAPT and everything and knew of our reputation, they would try to like use us like bulldogs or something, just, go in. But always believe in doing homework and due diligence and working with folks. But there comes a time when if you see clearly that folks don't want to work with you, that folks are still, continuing, this behavior, continuing disrespect, continuing not dealing with the disability issues, and the DEI and whatnot. It's like at some point, it's like, okay, we're done here. It's time for some direct action. And whether that direct action is going to be, a boycott, a petition, a protest, a vigil. That depends. And also too, like, I'm a community organizer. That's what I've been doing for about 43 years. And the first thing I learned in community organizing is you have to meet people where they are. You can't come into somebody's community telling them what you want. You have to hear them, listen to them, and meet them where they are. And deal, with what they want. No matter how you feel, it should go different. You know what I mean? You can't just walk up into somebody's community telling them what to do. And when I say community, I mean, like, whether it's a neighborhood, whether it's an organization, whether it's, you know, that. And if you have worked, with, the board, the PTA and all of that, if you work with them, for a reasonable length of time, and they still aren't, this is what they do. Yeah, at that point, then it's time to start organizing. It's time to start looking at what demands you want, and who you want to go after, because you always go for the top. Why go for, a relatively low level person who's not going to have the power to give you what you want? You always go directly to the individual or the entity that has the power to give you what you want. And then, I mean, in this day and age, plan an event at an anti-LGBTQ, like, that blows my mind, especially because I look at Washington State as a more progressive state, if you will. I mean, they have assisted suicide there, so not too progressive. But yeah, I always believe in doing my homework, doing my due diligence, and trying to work with you. But at some point, if there is nothing and there doesn't appear to be nothing, then it's time to start looking at other measures.
This is Sam, and there was a question from the chat saying, what if the person or what if the entity is pretending to be working with you? How do you navigate when people pretend?
If you already know that they're I mean, the question is a valid one, but if you're aware enough to figure out or have suspicions that they're just pretending, well, then they're not working with you, are they? And then it's time to look at other measures. If you have a sense that they're pretending, or doggone well that they're pretending, nah, they're not working with you. And it's time to look at other measures.
I want to say thank you for being willing to talk through some of that. I think that these things they're hard things for all of us to make decisions on, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk it through a little bit. It's 7:24, and I want to leave room for you to say some final words, say some closing things. But I also just want to express my appreciation for your time, for your wisdom, for your work, for your leadership, and that I look forward to seeing all the things that you have in progress, both of you, and all the things to come. But I'd like to give space to let you wrap things up.
This is Yordanos. I want to say thank you to everyone who is here with us tonight. And I want to reiterate something that I shared earlier, which is to be honest and work really hard at connecting some of the things that we've talked about here tonight with your own backyard. So the erasure of Black disabled people, what that looks like in everyday experience, and to take ownership and accountability of that in the ways that make sense with how you are positioned. And I want to thank you, Sam, for providing this opportunity, and a huge thank you to you, Anita. I have no words. I have no words. I'm so grateful to you, and I'm so honored to be sharing space with you again. Like, how can a person be so lucky? You've made my year. So good to see you.
This, Anita, is thank you, Yordanos, and thank you, Sam. And thank you for everyone who came and was able to stay, or who came and had to head out. This is this is really great. I don't even, I think that this is amazing. I think that we really, really, really have to reach younger folks. And I'm not just talking like the 21-year-olds or the 18-year-olds. I'm talking about the babies. In the DAP, we had children born and raised in the DAP, grew up into adults, and had their own children. Every last one of them have had success in some measure. Whether it's, you're a manager at a store and you live in your life, whether it's went on to school, whether it's, you followed in some footsteps, but I think it's so important that the little ones, the babies, know, that the little ones can see people who look like them, and whatnot, and see, wow, there's somebody out there who looks like me, who may have a similar disability to me, or maybe even have a totally different disability, and they're out there doing, all this important, the important work. And I think it's also important to lift up all forms of activism. You don't have to be out there in the trenches protesting and getting arrested. For many, it's not practical. For some, you really, you're in a situation where that's, not something that, you can do what you can. If you organize a petition online, do it. I have a number of friends who are literally housebound or bedbound, but they managed to live amazing activist lives out there. That's just the gift of the internet and, and Zoom and all that, that can allow disabled people to participate in what other ways are accessible to them, and ways that work, for each of us, according. So, looking at those kind of practical things as well, um, that, yes, we definitely want to be reaching out to the youth, that we definitely want to be encouraging, you know, um, our Black communities to be reaching out to us, listening to us, believing us, presuming competence, working with us, and um, as equals, if you will, not looking upon us as the other or them, or yeah, I guess I work with them because I can work with them kind of disabled. I don't know
Mhm.
about those other kind of disabled, and unfortunately we have that. And so I would encourage all of us to reach out, to do what we can to approach people with respect, um and with a sense of equity, and justice, and really sit down and talk and communicate. You may not agree, but you can always, talk and, and work, and work on things, and really be intersectional in how you deal, and really, yeah, really, really see people as full people, full human beings that you are going to, um, that you're going to spend, you know, that you're going to work with, and that you're going to deal with, and that you're going to educate, and that you're going to have them teach you, as well. So I probably ramble on, but I don't even have the words to say what an honor it is. Um, and yeah, let me hush because I can go on and on and on and on. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Thank you both to Anita and Yordanos. And thank you to everybody who came tonight. Thank you to our interpreters, especially to Ion, who stepped in at the last minute. And I wanted to let people know that I did put links in the chat for our upcoming events. We have Every Child Means Every Child, October 26th and 27th. And we will be having speakers and classes and legislators sharing about advocacy opportunities on a range of topics, from school funding to how to advocate, to LGBTQ advocacy, to addressing the education opportunity gap. And I want to highlight that on the 27th, we will have Yordanos sharing into Grinya about Advocacy 101. So we will be doing some Advocacy 101 classes in languages. So Hodan will do one in Somali, Manuela in Spanish, Yordanos in Tigrinya. I will be doing that in English. We will have ASL interpretation as well. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, the Washington Special Education Advisory Council will be meeting here in Seattle. That will be hybrid, and there will be a community forum Tuesday evening. For those of you who attend in person, there will be pizza. And there will be, I'm told that we will have interpretation into Somali, Spanish, and ASL. And again, that will be hybrid. So there are a lot of engagement opportunities this week. Bring your students, bring your kids. As Anita just said, start them young. So I just want to say again, thank you to everyone. And we will be, we did record tonight, and so we will be sharing that out. It might take us a little bit to get the recording up on YouTube. But thank you, everybody, and good night.